Rosie, try it. It's fun. You'll see.
Sounds fun.
You hold the balloon to your lips and then you suck in the helium.
The old helium trick, eh?
And when you speak, you sound like some alien from outer space. Go ahead, try it.
Alien from outer space, huh? Okay, here goes.
Hey, Maurice, shh, quiet. I think we've been invaded by creatures from another planet.
Creatures from another planet. Right.
I am from the planet Zeron. Take me to your leader. You Earth creatures look strange.
Maurice. Hey, how about tonight we do a freaky stories about the aliens and ghosts and spooky stuff, huh?
This is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine, Jimmy. June 12th, 1975 it was, when Jimmy learned he failed grade 10 for the 4th time. But he was not in a good mood for the high school disco dance. Still, he maintained a solid gold-chain, polyester-packing delinquent in a cheap white suit persona in the face of adversity. And he sure could disco dance. Every girl in that high school fell in love with Jimmy when they saw him shooting his cuffs and strutting his stuff, and the boys became real jealous. Especially Big Biff, the all-star fullback who turned into an ape on the dance floor. But then, Biff's honey, Susie Q, cut in on Jimmy, who took Susie into his arms and lifted her over his head. The girls screamed, Susie beamed, and Biff belted Jimmy. Kapow! Jimmy fought back until the brawl was broken up by the vice principal. Of course, Jimmy got tossed from the dance and ended up thumbing his way home to the trailer park on the outskirts of town. And that's when it happened. At first, he thought he saw a car racing along Route 66. But then the headlights began to rotate and change color in a fast, hypnotic pattern. This was no ordinary car. It had no wheels. And just as Jimmy was registering this fact, he was hit with the light. He came to in the middle of exploding mirror balls, flashing plastic floors, and pulsating bass notes. Jimmy was in the disco of his dreams. At first, he was not real sure what happened. Standing in a flashing neon archway was Cara Mia. Her 3 cinnamon eyes flashing, chartreuse hair exploding in a gorgeous bouffant, and her light blue complexion accented with a bright splash of gold leaf eyeshadow. She was wearing 6-inch purple platform shoes, and she needed them, since Cara Mia was barely 3'8". For the first time in his life, Jimmy felt like a giant. Cara Mia winked her middle eye at him and sang, "I'm glad you're here to meet and greet. You can tell by the way I move my feet. I need some help with this earthling beat. Can you teach me the hustle? That would be neat." Her parents brought Jimmy to their space station on the dark side of Mars to teach her to dance. Jimmy couldn't have been happier. He took Cara Mia out on the floor. They danced for a week, and well, you know, carbon-based life-form teenagers are all pretty subject to emotional stuff. So it didn't take too long for Jimmy and Cara Mia to be going steady and talking about maybe even getting engaged. Cara Mia's parental centering units were highly advanced, but they were not prepared to let her marry him. So before you could say Zor Blag Zerob de Voof, Jimmy is laying in a ditch on Route 66. Did Jimmy tell his tale so everybody could laugh? No. Jimmy kept his mouth shut, got a crew cut, a library card, and before you knew it, he was topping the honor roll. He went to university on an Air Force scholarship, and by 25, James had a PhD in astrophysics and was a top-rated flyer, chosen to be the astronaut on Project Red Planet, the first manned deep space probe to Mars. The first 12 months in the Red Planet module were uneventful, but on February 14th, the RPM passed behind Mars. For 3 hours, there was no communication with the spaceship. When the module came out from behind the Red Planet, all that could be heard from the RPM was the soundtrack of Saturday Night Fever. And when the capsule splashed down to the South Pacific, the RPM was empty, except for a pair of purple pulsating woman's platform shoes, size 1. This was a true story. It happened to a friend of mine. And James, I guess he had a close encounter of the 4th kind, love.
And now, kiddies, it's time to play Let's Scare Maurice. Are you ready? Maurice! Oh, Maurice, where are you? Maurice!
Did you see them?
See who?
The aliens!
No, not this time.
Oh, God, not this time. You mean you've seen them before?
What? You mean you've never been abducted by them for a experiment?
No, they wouldn't want. Who would want a maggot?
Are you kidding? On their planet, a maggot is considered a delicacy. Yeah.
But no, they're not gonna get me.
Maurice! Maurice! Don't you just love this? Well, here's another story, and then we'll play some more Let's Scare Maurice. Eh?
This is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine. Bobby was an army brat, so he kind of moved around a lot, all the time. New school, new town, new friends. But when he moved here, it was different. When Bobby did the first day at school thing, you know, looking lonely, not knowing who to talk to, a bunch of kids came over to help him. They were 10 years old, like Bobby, but they wore the baggy clothes like they thought it made them look real cool. But nobody else even gave Bobby a hello or anything. They say to Bobby that he has to pass some kind of initiation if he wants to be in whatever they think they are. Bobby says he'll do it. And they take him to the cemetery. They tell him 100 years ago some old guy went berserk and got rid of his whole family. And even though he was guilty, he had to have a trial. But the people in the town got themselves all worked up, broke him out of jail and strung him up right from that tree. And they pointed to the tree next to Bobby. And they buried him right here. And they pointed to the grave next to the tree. And what Bobby had to do for his initiation was come back into the cemetery at the stroke of midnight and take a long, scary-looking knife and jam it right into the dead man's grave. And Bobby says, sure, no problem. Well, it was one of those nights where the moon was low in the sky and the clouds whooshed across the sky so all the shadows were fluttering and moving. But Bobby was desperate to have friends, so he went for it. He got to the grave. He stood over it. The shadows seemed to be creeping up on him. And then he heard this real, spooky kind of moan. It froze him. The moan got louder and wavier and weirder. It was like coming from the grave. Bobby figured it had to be the guys hiding behind the tombstone trying to scare him. But then a big, dark cloud moved in and seemed to stop right in front of the moon. It got really, really dark. All he could see was the silhouette of the tombstone and a person. Maybe. He wasn't sure what it was, but the howling was still going on. Bobby pulled up all the bravery his 10-year-old body could muster. He crouched down over the grave, pulled the knife out, and plunged it deep into the earth. He waited for something to happen, but it didn't. Nothing. Just silence. He could go now. He got up, but something grabbed his leg. He tried pulling away, but whatever it was held on. It, he, the thing, the ghost, whatever, was keeping him here at the grave. Bobby screamed the longest, loudest scream anyone ever heard. That's when the other kids came out of hiding. The dark cloud finally passed, and the cemetery was once again bathed in moonlight. Bobby was sure glad he wasn't alone. He started to tell the guys about the thing that grabbed him from the grave. They looked down and saw that when Bobby had plunged the knife into the earth, he stuck it into his pant leg and pinned himself to the ground. That was a true story. It happened to a friend of mine, Bobby. And a week later, he was back at the cemetery. Only this time, he was the one hiding behind the tombstone and howling.